Welcome to Norm's and Sue's Motorcars. Those of you that have seen Norm's motorcycles might remember that cars, for me, were put on the back burner after I failed my car test in 1972. Then I met Sue. She wanted to learn to drive, but her parents had just gotten an automatic. Back in 1982, if you passed your test in an automatic, you couldn't drive a manual car. Most cars had manual gearboxes then. Cars with automatic transmission were not only more expensive, but seen as boring too. So Sue bought her first car, a manual transmission car. And this is what started our long and interesting history with four wheels. By gum, we've had some crap, but we've also enjoyed some brilliant motors. Let's get started. Previously owned by Oyston estate agents in Blackpool, this vehicle had done nearly 100,000 miles. It was exactly what first-time car buyers, at that time, could expect for their £300. Almost a wreck. WFR 4K was a blue Hillman Avenger, manufactured in 1972 at Roots Group's Brighton factory near Coventry. It had a 1250cc four-cylinder engine, putting out a sedate 56 brake horsepower. You were often overtaken, but rarely overtook. The Stromberg carburettor leaked as much fuel as it pumped into the engine, meaning it did 30 miles per gallon no matter how you drove it. The windscreen washer was a hand-operated push pump. You wound the windows up and down manually, and each door opened with either a key or its own mechanical button inside. There was a basic radio, but no cassette or CD or anything like that. It had old-fashioned drum brakes all round and dreadful cross-ply tyres, which were 10 years out of date even then. This car might take 2 minutes to get to 75 miles an hour and almost as long to stop on a wet road. I'd serviced the engine and made it run smooth, swapped out the gearbox because the original jumped out of second gear on the overrun, put in a new oil pump and renewed the big end shells. Oh, and I put in some electronics. Microcontrollers for ignition systems were common by the end of the 80s, but in 1982 our little Avenger surprised passengers with its onboard computer flashing its lights. I also designed an upgraded regulator for the weak dynamo generator. Was it reliable? Well, in the 20,000 miles we had it, the clutch cable broke once, leaving Sue stranded in the middle of the road. It overheated on Hard Knock Pass in the Lake District, and the heater fan failed loads of times. And oh yes, the fuel tank burst. That was handy. Bought at auction for £495, this Series 7 1.6L Chrysler Avenger was to be a restoration project. But I was burnt in the butt. The motor had been swapped for an ancient 1.5 litre version. A 1600 twin-carb engine from an Avenger GT was found, which was a gem after I blueprinted it. The restoration of that car took a year. I will never restore another, too much muck and rust for me. I have not a single picture of TLR 579R. It was reliable and slightly more sophisticated than our previous 1250, but it was no leather-bound Jag. The brown Rexine seats stunk to high heaven, but at least it had electric windscreen washers and an alternator that kept the headlights bright. We didn't keep it that long because in 1986 a car came along that was just too good to miss. For over £3,000 under the new price, £4,000, we got a nearly new Ford Orion 1.6L, and it was a little belter. For the first time we had comfort, much better fuel economy, and a car that was still under manufacturer's warranty. B791WNC was powered by a 1597cc Ford CVH four-cylinder engine, producing 78 brake horse at 5,800 RPM and transferring this via a 5-speed manual gearbox to the front wheels. Top speed was 104 miles an hour and fuel economy around 40 miles to the gallon. Ford's compound valve angle hemispherical combustion chamber engines were reasonably efficient, if not a bit rattly, with a fair bit of vibration. The single belt-driven overhead camshaft operated 2 valves per cylinder, as was the norm at the time. Gearbox was quite good for a front-wheel drive car of that era, although torque steer, this is where the steering is affected during hard acceleration, was quite noticeable. Like all Fords though, the basics were good. Hey, along with its hatchback sister, the Escort, this was the best-selling car in the UK at the time. We had 2 very young children back then. Getting them and all their paraphernalia around was a doddle. We considered this little car to be a bargain, and were very happy with it. But I was about to get a car that not only resulted in Sue having the Orion to herself, but catapulted me into the luxury car segment. I had begun to work for myself as an electronics consultant in September 1984. One of my customers, File Microsystems, had 2 directors who loved their big cars. When one of them unexpectedly died, I inherited his BMW 735 ISE. Dripping with tech, years ahead of its rivals, this digitally fuel-injected 3.5 litre straight 6 developed 215 brake horsepower at 5,200 RPM. A Borg-Warner 3-speed auto drove the rear wheels, pushing that car along to a top speed of 128 miles an hour. It had anti-lock brakes, yes, ABS in 1982. The front seats were electric everything, as were the door mirrors. Aircon? Of course it had. A trip computer was also provided to tell how much petrol you were guzzling out of that 85 litre tank. The stereo sound system was sensational. It did about 18 to the gallon in town and 25 on a long run. Except for one occasion when 218 miles in just 2 hours was covered, at 10.4 miles per gallon. If you're a policeman, I just made all of that up. When BMW announced their new E34 5 Series saloon in 1987, I just knew I had to have one. The business was doing well, so why not? Derek Woodman BMW on Vicarage Lane, Blackpool supplied the car. Waiting times were long and big deposits were demanded. The 2000 watt stereo system and anti-theft alarm all had to be retrofitted by the dealer in those days. The car was delivered to me for the August the 1st new registration plate day. F935 PCW looked a real treat, but all was not well. It had been back in the workshop for 6 of the 8 weeks it had been on the road. It seemed BMW car quality was equally as poor as that for their motorcycles. A good dealer can make or break a car brand, so when Chief Technician Keith Usher delivered it back to me, it was in great order. The 3.5 litre inline straight 6 engine was as smooth as you like. The Borg-Warner 4-speed auto gearbox was sublime. It did about 23 to the gallon on average, considered good for a big car at the time. I'd spec'd this car to have electric seats with memory, electric mirrors and rear window sunblind. How cool is that? It was basically an upgraded and more efficient version of the 735 barge I'd been used to. Once BMW's production faults had been sorted out, reliability was good. I covered about 38,000 miles in 2 years in this motor, and then the 13th letter of the alphabet began to call. Whilst I was swanning around in a luxury BMW, Sue was driving the Orion. It was a good, honest tool obtained at a good price. I thought maybe I should buy Sue a new one to celebrate her giving birth to our 3rd child, Mark. It was a complete secret. She knew nothing of the top-of-the-range 1.6 gear injection that was parked in our garage. On the morning of August the 1st, 1989, I suggested she go into the garage to fetch something for me. I watched as she and Claire stood motionless, stunned at this radiant red beauty. And so a fairy tale story began. No. This car turned out to be a thorough and utter pile of shit. Advertised as fuel-injected for power and smoothness, and with mechanical anti-lock brakes for safety, one might reasonably expect smoothness and ABS you could invoke more than once without warping the discs. Ford pushed back on all the faults. They were expert at this. The engine vibrated so much it ejected music cassettes under hard acceleration. I tried legal action, everything. The auto industry was near indestructible at this time. If driven slowly, the car was comfortable, economical at 35 miles per gallon, and it looked good. But where it failed most of all was on occupant safety. When a Ford Orion hit a broken down truck on a bend at less than 30 miles an hour, the car was unrecognisable afterwards. All occupants, including 2 young children, were killed. That was a wake-up call. It was immediately traded in. Sue's white 316i 4-door saloon was a basic car, the bottom of the BMW ladder in 1990. But it was much safer for her and the children. No aircon, wind-up windows, no alarm, no radio, etc, etc. BMWs were not really a complete car until the dealer spent a couple of days and several hundreds of your pounds fitting an alarm and radio. The handling, though, was good. The engine was good. If you hit a cat, you didn't die. Apart from the usual local family stuff, we went all over the country in H20 SCB. The 1600cc inline 4-cylinder alloy head engine put out 99 brake horse at 5,500 RPM, sending that power to the rear wheels via a 5-speed manual gearbox. Top speed was over 110 miles an hour with a 0 to 60 time of 10 plus seconds. Lethargic by modern standards, but who cares? It was a rock-solid, comfortable car that averaged around 38 miles to the gallon on petrol. By 1990, most people had gotten used to front-wheel drive cars and their more forgiving characteristics. The 3 Series BMWs, in particular, had an unfair reputation for spitting you off the road. The rear end might, if you were daft, step out on slippery surfaces if the accelerator was used too harshly. In a time before technology gave us stability and traction control, the foolish could always find a way to crash. The best handling cars in the world at that time were rear-wheel drive. If that wasn't true, why was Formula 1 rear-wheel drive? No, the E33 series was a safe car. We loved ours. I never ever thought I could own a brand new BMW M5. The first E34 M5 engines were hand-built with the best fitting parts. The leather was hand-stitched, everything about these cars was exclusive. After a long wait, the 51 Grand Beauty arrived. A real wolf in sheep's clothing. To most, it was a normal 5 Series saloon, till you put your foot down. The 3.5 litre 6-cylinder motor developed 310 brake horse at 6,900 RPM. Top speed was limited to 155. It would annihilate almost anything away from the lights, trounce all but supercars above 100 miles an hour, and handling was pretty good too. But when you took it easy, the motor was smooth, quiet, and believe it or not, very economical. On one occasion though, she had her face slapped. A shabby Lancia Delta Integrale showed me a clean pair of heels down Preston New Road near Kirkham. It was left-hand drive. I shook hands with the smug shit of a driver at the next traffic lights. This was the first of my cars to carry the registration plate NKB1. Norman's Folly. I paid far too much for it. It featured in a book, Superhero for Hire by William Shaw. Some elements of the story are true, some not. Anyhow, this Austin Hereford was the donor vehicle, brand new to the Chief Constable of Liverpool on the 1st of April 1952. Seriously. At about 8,000 miles and 5 months old, a pea-sized oil leak occurred. The engine and gearbox would have to come out. Warranty would cover all the costs, and I was blown away with Derek Woodman's professionalism. What dismayed me though were the other faults they found. Incorrect grade pistons, poor valve-to-valve guide clearances and a poorly machined timing cover. A month later, the car was handed back in superb order. It was 20% better on fuel, achieving 28 miles per gallon average. It was also much faster than before, hitting the 155 mile an hour road speed limiter very smartly indeed. Sliding this car around roundabouts was easy and very controllable. Wearing out rear tyres in 7,000 miles was expensive. Of course, several things broke during my 2-year ownership, although the motor and transmission remained fabulous. I won't mention the throttles opening wide, on their own, on a single track road, lighting up the rear tyres. No, best not. BMW announced an update to the M5 for 1992. Suspension was electronically adjustable. There would be selectable driving modes. Power was raised to 340 brake horsepower. I thought, I better get one then. Stroke tank to almost 3.8 litres, the extra mid-range torque was nice, but not everything was better. Fuel consumption was heavier. Okay, in 1992, if you wanted big performance, you weren't concerned about gas consumption. Nobody gave a hoot about CO2 emissions then. A bit like now, yeah? The engine management was very steppy rather than smooth. I hated it. The plush interior had hand-stitched leather, even the door pockets. One day, when my 9-year-old son Chris needed a pee, I opened the driver's door to give him some privacy. He pissed in the door pocket. Fearing for his life, Sue rushed round the car to save him, then mop up the urine. Class act. Handling was great. BMW felt with near 350 brake horse on tap, the wheels needed to be up to 8 Js on the front, 9 Js on the rear. For the time, these were big. The tyres lasted a bit longer. On the downside, there was too much grip for me to drift off roundabouts like before. BMW M Sport believed in driver control, so still no driver aids, except ABS. I like this. Of the 3 M5s I've owned, this was my least favourite, although it could be argued it looked the coolest. One strange thing though, nothing failed. At the same time I bought my second M5, Sue got her 320i. This used a beautiful straight 6 engine, as velvety smooth and mellow as any. It boasted a new 6-channel engine management feature, 1 channel for each cylinder. The idea being, if one channel fails, the car will still run on the other 5. At a week old, it refused to start. Apparently, that indestructible engine management computer had completely failed. Nice one, BMW. This car was very, very smooth. The engine revving to its 6,000 RPM redline as eager as you like. A bit gutless at low revs, mind, but a gem of an engine nonetheless. Handling was pretty good, aided by semi-trailing arm rear suspension and generous anti-roll bars. It felt like a quality machine. Sue does a lot of miles in her cars. The 320 had no problems at all after that initial engine issue. Yippee! After a couple of M cars, I fancied a new 7 Series with a 5.4 litre V12 engine, the standard, not the long wheelbase version. I specified a Traffic Master warning system, nothing else like it in 1995. It worked well. The colour I ordered was very similar to British Racing Green. Derek Woodman then had a cancelled order for one of exactly the same fit as mine, but in a metallic blue. A discount was offered. Believe me, totally unheard of at this time. So I took it. He had a TV as well, rather good, but of course only usable when parked up. All the seats were electric, even in the rear. By this time, BMW were integrating entertainment systems into their cars, meaning that the radio and the CD player came factory fitted. Sound system was okay, if not blistering. It was a 2-ton flying monster that drunk juice at 18 miles per gallon, over 20 if you were really careful. The M73 engine has a reputation for sophistication, but all I can say is mine was not sophisticated. It pinked like hell, even on high-octane juice. For a heavy car, it handled okay. The 5-speed Borg-Warner auto transmission was superb. The only fault that I can recall was an alternator flashover, which caused the charge warning light to come on. I was on the M27 near Portsmouth. I figured I could drive for hours without a problem. No chance. Within 20 minutes, the car began to shut down and advised me to stop immediately. The electronics in that 7 Series drew 70 amps. They might have been good with engines, but that electronic design was plain ridiculous. Sue's 320 had done over 90,000 miles. This new 2.5 litre E36 323i replaced it. In a slightly lower state of tune than usual, hence the 323 designation, this was a magnificent motor car. At first. It was even smoother than the 320, but with loads more low and mid-range torque. What a belter. This lovely machine whistled up to 140 miles an hour no bother. Fuel consumption averaged in the mid to high 20s. But after about 20,000 miles, whilst it was at Derek Woodman's for a service, they advised us that the engine block would need replacement. Apparently the Nicocil coating on the cylinders was failing and BMW would fund all the costs. Caused by rogue sulphur in the petrol, it affected hundreds of thousands of engines. The M52 aluminium engine block was replaced by a cast iron version, increasing weight and causing condensation in the oil. Although a retrograde step, the car was still a good tool, covering well over 100,000 miles in Sue's hands. Let's finish off part 1 with my third and last M5. The E39 V8 had been on order for over 18 months. I had to sign an agreement not to resell it in under a year. BMW arrogance reigned supreme, and believe it or not, on the final invoice, items I had ordered but they could not supply were listed as removed at no cost to the customer. My rage was indescribable. I was told if I didn't want it, they had thousands of others that would. In my video Norm's Motorcycles, I mentioned that this was the reason I moved away from BMW bikes. The car arrived in September 1999. With 400 horsepower at 6,600 RPM and 500 Newton meters of torque, weighing only 1,695 kilograms, it was lovely. Eventually. At 50 miles an hour, the whine from the rear axle was horrendous. They replaced the complete back axle assembly but wouldn't change the gearbox, which was also noisy in third gear. The engine used 4 litres of oil in the first 250 miles. Blinking heck. After 1,500 miles, the oil consumption dropped to about 2,000 miles per litre, which was considered okay for M cars of the day. Once these issues had been addressed, my car was brilliant. It was fast, handled it excellently, but used more juice than any of my previous M5s, about 23 miles per gallon average, 16 in town. BMW were losing some eco-credibility in my mind. I kept it for 6 years, until BMW declined extended insurance on the powertrain. This is the point that these cars go to enthusiasts and the backstreet garage brigade. Too dear to keep on the road otherwise. So there it is, 1982 to 2006, part 1 of Norm's Motorcars. Thank you for watching and please join us again for part 2.